Seth, by Francis Hodgson Burnett. He came in one evening at sunset with the empty coal train, his dull young face pale and heavy-eyed with weariness, his corduroy suit dusty and travel-stained, his worldly possessions tied up in the smallest of handkerchief bundles and slung upon the stick resting on his shoulder. And naturally his first appearance attracted some attention among the loungers about the shed dignified by the title of depot. I say naturally, because arrivals upon the trains to Black Creek were so scarce as to be regarded as curiosities, which again might be said to be natural. The line to the mines had been in existence 2 months, since the English company had taken them in hand, and pushed the matter through with an energy startling to, and not exactly approved by, the majority of good East Tennesseans. After the first week or so of arrivals, principally Welsh and English miners with an occasional Irishman, the trains had returned daily to the creek without a passenger, and accordingly this one created some trifling sensation. Not that his outward appearance was particularly interesting or suggestive of approaching excitement. He was only a lad of 19 or 20, in working English-cut garb, and with a short, awkward figure and a troubled, homely face, a face so homely and troubled, in fact, that its half-bewildered look was almost pathetic. He advanced toward the shed hesitatingly, and touched his cap as if half in clumsy courtesy and half in timid appeal. "Mesters," he said, "good day to yo." The company bestirred themselves with one accord, and to the roughest and most laconic gave him a brief "good day." "You're English," said a good-natured Welshman, "aren't you, my lad?" "Aye, mester," was the reply, "I'm fro Lancashire." He sat down on the edge of the rough platform, and laid his stick and bundle down in a slow, wearied fashion. "Fro Lancashire," he repeated in a voice as wearied as his action. "Fro th Deepton coal mines there. You'll know th name on 'em, I ha no doubt. Th same company owns 'em as owns these." "What?" said an outsider, "Langley and 'em." The boy turned himself round and nodded. "Aye," he answered, "them, that was why I come here, I come to get work fro him." He faltered in his speech oddly, and even reddened a little, at the same time rubbing his hands together with a nervousness which seemed habitual to him. "Mester Eddard, I mean," he added, "th young mester as is here. I heard as he liked 'Merica and an I come." The loungers glanced at each other, and their glance did not mean high appreciation of the speaker's intellectual powers. There was a lack of practicalness in such faith in another man as expressed itself in the wistful, hesitant voice. "Did he say he'd give you work?" asked the first man who had questioned him, the Welshman Evans. "No, I do not think he'd know me if he seed me. There were so many on us." Another exchange of glances and then another question, "Where are you going to stay?" The homely face reddened more deeply, and the lad's eyes, dull, soft, almost womanish eyes, raised themselves to the speaker's. "Do yo knew anybody as would be likely to tack me in a bit," he said, "until I ha toime to earn th wage to pay, I wouldna wrong no moan a penny as had trusted me." There was manifest hesitation, and then some one spoke, "Lancashire Jack might." "Mester," said the lad to Evans, "would you mind speaking a word for me? I ha had a long tramp and I'm fagged like," and he stopped and rose from his seat with a hurried movement. "Who's that there as is comin'?" he demanded. "Isna it th young mester?" The someone in question was a young man on horseback, who at that moment turned the corner and rode toward the shed with a loose rein, allowing his horse to choose his own pace. "Aye," said the lad with an actual tremor in his excited voice, "it's him, sure eno," and sank back on his seat again as if he had found himself scarcely strong enough to stand. I ha not oughten much for 2 or 3 days," he said to Evans. There was not a man on the platform who did not evince some degree of pleasure at the approach of the newcomer. The last warm rays of the sun, already sinking behind the mountains, seemed rather to take pride in showing what a debonair young fellow he was, in glowing kindly upon his handsome face and strong, graceful figure, and touching up to greater brightness his bright hair. The face was one to be remembered with a sentiment approaching gratitude for the mere existence of such genial and unspoiled good looks, but the voice that addressed the men was one to be loved, and loved without stint. It was so clear and light-hearted and frank. "Boys," said he, "good evening to you. Evans, if you could spare me a minute." Evans rose at once. "I'll speak to him," he said to the lad at his side. "His word will go further with Lancashire Jack than mine would." He went to the horse's side and stood there for a few minutes talking in an undertone, and then he turned to the stranger and beckoned. "Come here," he said. The lad took up his bundle and obeyed the summons, advancing with an awkward, almost stumbling step, suggestive of actual weakness as well as the extremity of shyness. Reaching the two men, he touched his cap humbly, and stood with timorous eyes upraised to the young man's face. Langley met his glance with a somewhat puzzled look, which presently passed away in a light laugh. "I'm trying to remember who you are, my lad," he said, "but I shall be obliged to give it up. I know your face, I think, but I have no recollection of your name. I dare say I have seen you often enough. You came from Deepton, Evans tells me." "Aye, Mester Fro Deepton. A long journey for a lad like you to take alone," with inward pity for the heavy face. "Aye, Mester. And now you want work?" "If you please, Mester." "Well, well, cheerily, we will give it to you. There's work enough, though it isn't such as you had at Deepton. What is your name?" "Seth, Mester Seth Rayner," shifting the stick and bundle in uneasy eagerness from one shoulder to another. "And I'm used to hard work, Mester. It were not easy work we had at Deepton mine, and I'm stronger than I look. It's fagness as makes me trembly, and hunger." "Hunger? I ha not tasted sin, neat afore last," shamefacedly. "I hadna money to buy, and it seemed like I could hold out." "Hold out," echoed Langley in some excitement. "That's a poor business, my lad. Here, come with me, the other matter can wait, Evans." The downcast face and ungainly figure troubled him in no slight degree as they moved off together. They seemed to express in some indescribable fashion so much of dull and patient pain, and they were so much at variance with the free grandeur of the scene surrounding them. It was as if a new element were introduced into the very air itself. Black Creek was too young yet to have known hunger or actual want of any kind. The wild things on the mountain sides had scarcely had time to learn to fear the invaders of their haunts, or understand that they were to be driven backward. The warm wind was fragrant with the keen freshness of pine and cedar. Mountain and forest and sky were stronger than the human stragglers they closed around and shut out from the world. "We don't see anything like that in Lancashire," said Langley. "That kind of thing is new to us, my lad, isn't it?" with a light gesture toward the mountain in whose side the workers had burrowed. "Aye, Mester," raising troubled eyes to its grandeur, "iverything's new. I feel all lost sometimes and feared like." Langley lifted his hat from his brow to meet a little passing breeze, and as it swept softly by he smiled in the enjoyment of its coolness. "Afraid?" he said. "I don't understand that." "I do not see into it mysen, Mester. Happen it's bigness and quiet and lonely look, and happen it's summat wrong in mysen. I've lived in cool and smoke and crowd and work so long as it troubles me in a manner to look so high." "Does it?" said Langley, a few faint lines showing themselves on his forehead. "That's a queer fancy, so high," turning his glance upward to where the tallest pine swayed its dark plume against the clear blue. "Well, so it is, but you will get used to it in time," shaking off a rather unpleasant sensation. "Happened so, Mester, in time," was the simple answer, and then silence fell upon them again. They had not very far to go. The houses of the miners, rough shanties hurriedly erected to supply immediate needs, were most of them congregated together, or at most stood at short distances from each other, the larger ones signifying the presence of feminine members in a family, and perhaps 2 or 3 juvenile pioneers, the smaller ones being occupied by younger miners, who lived in couples or sometimes even alone. Before one of the larger shanties Langley reined in his horse. "A Lancashire man lives here," he said, "and I am going to leave you with him." In answer to his summons, a woman came to the door, a young woman whose rather unresponsive face wakened somewhat when she saw who waited. "Feyther," she called out, "it's Mester Langley, and he's gettin' a stranger why him." Feyther, approaching the door, showed himself a burly individual, with traces of coal dust in all comers not to be reached by hurried and not too fastidious ablutions. Clouds of tobacco smoke preceded and followed him, and much stale incense from the fragrant weed exhaled itself from his well-worn corduroys. "I ha not niver seed him afore," he remarked after a gruff by no means ill-natured greeting, signifying the stranger by a duck of the head in his direction. "A Lancashire lad, Janner," answered Langley. "I want a home for him." Janner regarded him with evident interest but shook his head dubiously. "Ax missus," he remarked succinctly, "dunnot ax me." Langley's good-humoured laugh had a touch of conscious power in it. If it depended upon missus, he was safe enough. His bright good looks and gay grace of manner never failed with the women. The most practical and uncompromising melted, however unwillingly, before his sunshine, and the suggestion of chivalric deference which seemed a second nature with him. So it was easy enough to parley with missus. A Lancashire lad, Mrs. Janner, he said, and so I know you'll take care of him. Lancashire folk have a sort of fellow feeling for each other, you see. That was why I could not make up my mind to leave him until I saw him in good hands, and yours are good ones. Give him a square meal as soon as possible, he added in a lower voice. I will be accountable for him myself. When he lifted his hat and rode away, the group watched him until he was almost out of sight, the general sentiment expressing itself in every countenance. There's summat noise about that there young chap, Janner remarked with the slowness of a man who was rather mystified by the fascination under whose influence he found himself. Some mat as goes why, grain loik. I answered his wife, so there is, and it's nater too. Coom along in, lad, to Seth, and ha summat to eat, yo look faintish. Black Creek found him a wonderfully quiet member of society, the lad Seth. He came and went to and from the mine with mechanical regularity, working with the rest, taking his meals with the Janners, and sleeping in a small shanty left vacant by the desertion of a young miner who had found life at the settlement too monotonous to suit his tastes. No new knowledge of his antecedents was arrived at. He had come fro Deepton, and that was the beginning and end of the matter. In fact, his seemed to be a peculiarly silent nature. He was fond of being alone, and spent most of his spare time in the desolate little shanty. Attempts at conversation appeared to trouble him, it was discovered, and accordingly he was left to himself as not worth the cultivating. Why does na tha talk more? Demanded Janner's daughter, who was a strong, brusque young woman with a sharp tongue. I ha not gotten out to say, was the meekly deprecating response. Miss Janner, regarding the humble face with some impatience remarkably enough, found nothing to deride in it though, being neither a beauty nor in her first bloom, and sharp of tongue, as I have said, she was somewhat given to derision as a rule. In truth, the uncomplaining patience in the dull, soft eyes made her feel a little uncomfortable. I do not know what ails thee, she remarked with unceremonious candour, but there's summat as does. It's nowt as can be cured, said the lad, and turned his quiet face away. In his silent fashion, he evinced a certain degree of partiality for his host's daughter. Occasionally, after his meals, he lingered for a few moments watching her at her work when she was alone, sitting by the fire or near the door, and regarding her business-like movements with a wistful air of wonder and admiration. And yet so unobtrusive were these mute attentions that Bess Janner was never roused to any form of resentment of them. "Tha's goin' to ha a sweetheart at last, my lass," was one of Janner's favourite witticisms, but Bess bore it with characteristic coolness. "I'm known as big a foo as I look," she would say, "and I dunnot mind him no more nor if he woos a wench hisson." Small as was the element of female society at Black Creek, this young woman was scarcely popular. She was neither fair nor fond. A predominance of muscle and a certain rough deftness of hand were her chief charms. Ordinary sentiment would have been thrown away upon her, and fortunately she was spared it. "She's known hurt why good looks are best," her father remarked with graceful chivalrousness on more than one occasion, "but who can heave a'most as much as I can, and that's summat." Consequently, it did not seem likely that the feeling she had evidently awakened in the breast of their lodger was akin to the tender passion. "Am I in your way?" he would ask apologetically, and the answer was invariably a gracious if curt one. "No, no more than cat, stay where yo are, lad, and make yourisen comfortable." There came a change, however, in the nature of their intercourse, but this did not occur until the lad had been with them some 3 months. For several days he had been ailing and unlike himself. He had been even more silent than usual. He had eaten little and lagged on his way to and from his work. He looked thinner and his step was slow and uncertain. There was so great an alteration in him, in fact, that Bess softened toward him visibly. She secretly bestowed the best morsels upon him, and even went so far as to attempt conversation. "Let yoa work go a bit," she advised. "Yoa known fit for it." But he did not give up until the 3rd week of illness, and then one warm day at noon Bess, at work in her kitchen among dishes and pans, was startled from her labours by his appearing at the door and staggering toward her. "What's up, why, yo?" she demanded. "Yo look like death." "I do not know," he faltered, and then staggering again caught at her dress with feeble hands. "Do not yo," he whispered, sinking forward. "Do not yo let no one come anig me." She flung a strong arm around him and saved him from a heavy fall. His head dropped helplessly against her breast. "He's fainted dead away," she said. "He mun ha been worse than he thowt fur." She laid him down and, loosening his clothes at the throat, went for water. But a few minutes after she had bent over him for the 2nd time, an exclamation, which was almost a cry, broke from her. "Lord ha mercy!" she said and fell back, losing something of color herself. She had scarcely recovered herself even when, after prolonged efforts, she succeeded in restoring animation to the prostrate figure under her hands. The heavy eyes opening met hers in piteous appeal and protest. "I thought it were death come," said the lad. "I were hoppin' as it were death." "What ha yo done as yo need wish that?" said Bess, and then, her voice shaking with excitement which got the better of her and forced her to reveal herself, she added, "I've fun out that as yo have been hidden." Abrupt and unprefaced as her speech was, it scarcely produced the effect she had expected it would. Her charge neither flinched nor reddened. He laid a weak, rough hand upon her dress with a feebly pleading touch. "Dunnot yo turn agin me," he whispered. "Yo wouldna if yo knew." "But I dunnot know," Bess answered, a trifle doggedly, despite her inward relentings. "I come to yo," persisted the lad, "because I thought yo wouldna turn agin me. Yo wouldna," patiently again, "if yo knew." Gradually the ponderous witticism in which Janner had indulged became an accepted joke in the settlement. Bess had fallen a victim to the tender sentiment at last. She had found an adorer, and had apparently succumbed to his importunities. Seth spent less time in his shanty, and more in her society. He lingered in her vicinity on all possible occasions, and seemed to derive comfort from her mere presence. And Bess not only tolerated but encouraged him. Not that her manner was in the least degree effusive. She rather extended a rough protection to her admirer, and displayed a tendency to fight his battles and employ her sharper wit as a weapon in his behalf. "Yo may get best o' him," she said dryly once to the wit of the creek who had been jocular at his expense, "but yo canna get best o' me. Try me a bit, lad, I'm better worth your metal." "What's tacken yo, lass?" said her mother at another time. "You're that theer soft about chap as theer's no mackin' yo out. Yo were niver like to be soft afore," somewhat testily. "And it's known his good looks, neither." "No," said Bess, "it's known his good looks." "Happen it's his lack on 'em then." "Happen it is," and there the discussion ended for want of material. There was one person, however, who did not join in the jesting, and this was Langley. When he began to understand the matter, he regarded the two with sympathetic curiosity and interest. Why should not their primitive and uncouth love develop, and form a tie to bind the homely lives together, and warm and brighten them? It may have been that his own mental condition at this time was such as would tend to often his heart, for an innocent passion, long cherished in its bud, had burst into its full blooming during the months he had spent amid the novel beauty and loneliness, and perhaps his new bliss subdued him somewhat. Always ready with a kindly word, he was specially ready with it where Seth was concerned. He never passed him without one, and frequently reined in his horse to speak to him at greater length. Now and then, on his way home at night, he stopped at the shanty's door, and summoning the lad detained him for a few minutes chatting in the odorous evening air. It was thoroughly in accordance with the impulses of his frank and generous nature that he should endeavour to win upon him and gain his confidence. "We are both Deepton men," he would say, "and it is natural that we should be friends. We are both alone and a long way from home." But the lad was always timid and slow of speech. His gratitude showed itself in ways enough, but it rarely took the form of words. Only one night as the horse moved away, he laid his hand upon the bridle and held it a moment, some powerful emotion showing itself in his face, and lowering his voice until it was almost a whisper. "Mester," he said, "if there's iver aught to be done as is hard and like to bring pain and danger, you'll not forget me." Langley looked down at him with a mingled feeling of warm pity and deep bewilderment. "Forget you?" he echoed. The dullness seemed to have dropped away from the commonplace face as if it had been a veil. The eyes were burning with a hungry pathos and fire and passion. They were raised to his and held him with the power of an indescribable anguish. "Dunnot forget as I'm here," the voice growing sharp and intense, "ready and eager and waitin' for time to come. Let me do summat or brave summat or suffer summat for God's sake." When the young man rode away, it was with a sense of weight and pain upon him. He was mystified. People were often grateful to him, but their gratitude was not such as this. This oppressed and disturbed him. It was suggestive of a mental condition whose existence seemed almost impossible. What a life this poor fellow must have led, since the simplest kindliness aroused within him such emotion as this. "It is hard to understand," he murmured. "It is even a little horrible. One fancies these duller natures do not reach our heights and depths of happiness and pain, and yet, Cathy, my dear," breaking off suddenly and turning his face upward to the broad, free blue of the sky as he quickened his horse's pace, "let me think of you, this hurts me." But he was drawn nearer to the boy, and did his best to cheer and help him. His interest in him grew as he saw him oftener, and there was not only the old interest but a new one. Something in the lad's face, a something which had struck him as familiar even at first, began to haunt him constantly. He could not rid himself of the impression it left upon him, and yet he never found himself a shade nearer a solution of the mystery. "Rainer," he said to him on one of the evenings when he had stopped before the shanty, "I wish I knew why your face troubles me so." "Does it trouble yo, Mester?" "Yes," with a half-laugh, "I think I may say it troubles me. I have tried to recollect every lad in Deepton, and I have no remembrance of you." "Happen not, Mester," meekly. "I niver were much noticed, yo see. I'm one o' them as folk is more like to pass by." An early train arriving next morning brought visitors to the creek. A business-like elderly gentleman and his daughter, a pretty girl, with large bright eyes and an innocent rosy face, which became rosier and prettier than ever when Mr. Edward Langley advanced from the depot shed with uncovered head and extended hand. "Cathy," he said when the first greetings had been interchanged, "what a delight this is to me. I did not hope for such happiness as this." "Father wanted to see the mines," answered Cathy, sweetly demure, "and I wanted to see Black Creek. Your letters were so enthusiastic." "A day will suffice, I suppose." Her paternal parent was wandering on amiably. "A man should always investigate such matters for himself. I can see enough to satisfy me between now and the time for the return train." "I cannot," whispered Langley to Cathy. "A century would not suffice, if the sun would but stand still." The lad Seth was late for dinner that day, and when he entered the house Bess turned from her dishwashing to give him a sharp, troubled look. "Art thou ill again?" she asked. "Nay," he answered, "na but a bit tired and heavy loik." He sat down upon the doorstep with wearily clasped hands, and eyes wandering toward the mountain, whose pine-crowned summit towered above him. He had not even yet outlived the awe of its majesty, but he had learned to love it and draw comfort from its beauty and strength. "Does thou want thy dinner?" asked Bess. "No, thank yo," he said, "I couldna eat." The dishwashing was deserted incontinently, and Bess came to the door, towel in hand, her expression at once softened and shaded with discontent. "Summat's hurt yo," she said. "What is it?" "Summat's hurt yo sore." The labour-roughened hands moved with their old nervous habit, and the answer came in an odd, jerky, half-connected way. "I do not know why it should ha' done. I mun be mad or summat. I niver had no hope nor nothin'. There niver were no reason why I should ha' had. I mun be wrong somehow, or it wouldna stick to me this road. I canna get rid on it, and I canna feel as if I want to. What's up, why me? What's taken howd on me?" His voice breaking and the words ending in a sharp hysterical gasp like a sob. Bess wrung her towel with a desperate strength which spoke of no small degree of tempestuous feeling. Her brow knit itself and her lips were compressed. "What's happened?" she demanded after a pause. "I canna mak thee out." The look that fell upon her companion's face had something of shame in it. His eyes left the mountain side and drooped upon his clasped hands. "There were a lass coom to look at Th Place today," he said. "A lady lass, why her feyther and him. She were all rosy red and fair white, and it seemed as if she were that happy as her laughin' made birds mark back at her. He took her up mountain, and we heard 'em both even high up among laurels. Sound o' their joy floatin' down from the height, so nigh blue sky made me sick and weak loik. They were no so gay when they come back, but her eyes were shinin', and so were his, and I heard him say to her as folk didna know how nigh heaven top o' mountain were." Bess wrung her towel again, and regarded the mountain with manifest impatience and trouble. "Happen it'll coom reet some day," she said. "Reet," repeated the lad as if mechanically. "I hadna told mysen as o't were exactly wrong, onny I canna see things clear. I never could, and more I ax mysen questions worse it gets. Where could I lay blame?" Blame," said Bess. "Coom thar and get a bite to eat," and she shook out the towel with a snap and turned away. "Coom thar," she repeated. "I mun get my work done." That night, as Seth lay upon his pallet in the shanty, the sound of Langley's horse's hoofs reached him with an accompaniment of a clear, young masculine voice singing a verse of some sentimental modern carol, a tender song ephemeral and sweet. As the sounds neared the cabin, the lad sprang up restlessly, and so was standing at the open door when the singer passed. "Good neat, Mester," he said. The singer slackened his pace and turned his bright face toward him in the moonlight, waving his hand. "Good night," he said, "and pleasant dreams. Mine will be pleasant ones, I know. This has been a happy day for me, Rainer. Good night." When the two met again, the brighter face had sadly changed. Its beauty was marred with pain, and the shadow of death lay upon it. Entering Janner's shanty the following morning, Seth found the family sitting around the breakfast table in ominous silence. The meal stood untouched, and even Bess looked pale and anxious. All three glanced toward him questioningly as he approached, and when he sat down Janner spoke. "Hasna tha heard th news?" he asked. "Nay," Seth answered, "I ha heard nowt." Bess interposed hurriedly. "Dunnot yo fear him, feyther," she said. "Happen it isna so bad after all. 4 or live folk were taken down ill last neet, Seth, and young mester were among 'em, and there's them as says it's cholera." It seemed as if he had not caught the full meaning of her words. He only stared at her in a startled, bewildered fashion. "Cholera," he repeated dully. "There's them as knows it's cholera," said Janner with gloomy significance. "And if it's cholera it's death," and he let his hand fall heavily upon the table. "I," put in Mrs. Janner in a fretful wail, "fur they say as it's worse I these parts than it is I England, heat maks it worse. And here we are midst o summer toime, and there's no knowin' where it'll end. I wish tha'd taken my advice, Janner, and stayed I Lancashire. I wish we were safe at home. Better less wage and more safety. Yod niwa ha kum if yod listened to me." "Howd thy tongue, mother," said Bess, but the words were not ungently spoken, notwithstanding their bluntness. "Dunnot let us mak it worse than it need be. Seth, lad, eat thy breakfast." But there was little breakfast eaten. The fact was that at the first spreading of the report a panic had seized upon the settlement, and Janner and his wife were by no means the least influenced by it. A stolidly stubborn courage upheld Bess, but even she was subdued and somewhat awed. "I niwa heard much about cholera," Seth said to her after breakfast. "Is this here true, this as thy feyther says?" "I dunnot know for sure," Bess answered gravely, "but it's bad eno." "Come out wy me into fresh air," said the lad, laying his hand upon her sleeve. "I mun say a word or so to thee," and they went out together. There was no work done in the mine that day. 2 of 3 new cases broke out, and the terror spread itself and grew stronger. In fact, Black Creek scarcely comported itself as stoically as might have been expected. A messenger was dispatched to the nearest town for a doctor, and his arrival by the night train was awaited with excited impatience. When he came, however, the matter became worse. He had bad news to tell himself. The epidemic had broken out in the town he had left, and great fears were entertained by its inhabitants. "If you had not been so entirely thrown on your own resources," he said, "I could not have come." A heavy enough responsibility rested upon his shoulders during the next few weeks. He had little help from the settlement. Those who were unstricken looked on at the progress of the disease with helpless fear. Few indeed escaped a slight attack, and those who did were scarcely more useful than his patients. In the whole place he found only 2 reliable and unterrified assistants. His first visit was to a small farmhouse round the foot of the mountain, and a short distance from the mine. There he found the family huddled in a back room like a flock of frightened sheep, and in the only chamber a handsome, bright-haired young fellow lying upon the bed with a pinched and ominous look upon his comely face. The only person with him was a lad roughly clad in miner's clothes, a lad who stood by chafing his hands, and who turned desperate eyes to the door when it opened. "Yo are too late, mester," he said. "Yo are too late." But young as he was, and he was a very young man, the doctor had presence of mind and energy, and he flung his whole soul and strength into the case. The beauty and solitariness of his patient roused his sympathy almost as if it had been the beauty of a woman. He felt drawn toward the stalwart, helpless young figure lying upon the humble couch in such apparent utter loneliness. He did not count much upon the lad at first. He seemed too much bewildered and shaken, but it was not long before he changed his mind. "You are getting over your fear," he said. "It wasna fear, mester," was the answer he received, "or at least it wasna fear for myson." "What is your name?" "Seth Raynor, mester. Him and me," with a gesture toward the bed, "come from same place. Cholera couldna fear me fro him, nor nowt else if he were I need." So it was Seth Raynor who watched by the bedside, and laboured with loving care and a patience which knew no weariness, until the worst was over and Langley was among the convalescent. "The poor fellow and Bess Janner were my only stay," the young doctor was wont to say. "Only such care as his would have saved you, and you had a close race of it as it was." During the convalescence nurse and invalid were drawn together with a stronger tie through every hour. Wearied and weak, Langley's old interest in the lad became a warm affection. He could scarcely bear to lose sight of the awkward boyish figure, and never rested so completely as when it was by his bedside. "Give me your hand, dear fellow," he would say, "and let me hold it. I shall sleep better for knowing you are near me." He fell asleep thus one morning, and awakened suddenly to a consciousness of some new presence in the room. Seth no longer sat in the chair near his pillow, but stood a little apart, and surely he would have been no lover if the feeble blood had not leaped in his veins at the sight of the face bending over him, the innocent, fair young face which had so haunted his pained and troubled dreams. "Kathy!" he cried out aloud. The girl fell upon her knees and caught his extended hand with a passionate little gesture of love and pity. "I did not know," she poured forth in hurried, broken tones. "I have been away ever since the sickness broke out at home. They sent me away, and I only heard yesterday. Father, tell him, for I cannot." He scarcely heard the more definite explanation. He was at once so happy and so fearful. "Sweetheart," he said, "I can scarcely bear to think of what may come of this, and yet how blessed it is to have you near me again. The danger for me is all over. Even your dear self could not have cared for me more faithfully than I have been cared for. Raynor there has saved my life." But Kathy could only answer with a piteous, remorseful jealousy. Why was it not I who saved it? Why was it not I? And the place where Seth had stood waiting was vacant, for he had left it at the sound of Langley's first joyous cry. When he returned an hour or so later, the more restful look Langley had fancied he had seen on his face of late had faded out. The old unawakened heaviness had returned. He was nervous and ill at ease, shrinking and conscious. "I've come to say good neet to yo," he said hesitatingly to the invalid. Young lady says as she and her father will tak my place a bit. I'll come mornin'." "You want rest," said Langley. "You are tired, poor fellow." Quietly, "I'm tired, and worst is over, yo see, and she's here," with a patient smile. "Yo wannot need me, and there's them as does." From that hour his work at this one place seemed done. For several days he made his appearance regularly to see if he was needed, and then his visits gradually ended. He had found a fresh field of labour among the sufferers in the settlement itself. He was as faithful to them as he had been to his first charge. The same unflagging patience showed itself, the same silent constancy and self-sacrifice. Scarcely a man or woman had not some cause to remember him with gratitude, and there was not one of those who had jested at and neglected him, but thought of their jests and neglect with secret shame. There came a day, however, when they missed him from among them. If he was not at one house he was surely at another, it appeared, for some time. But when, after making his round of visits, the doctor did not find him, he became anxious. He might be at Janner's, but he was not there, nor among the miners, who had gradually resumed their work as the epidemic weakened its strength and their spirits lightened. Making these discoveries at nightfall, the doctor touched up his horse in some secret dread. He had learned earlier than the rest to feel warmly toward this simple co-labourer. "Perhaps he's gone out to pay Langley a visit," he said. "I'll call and see. He may have stopped to have a rest." But before he had passed the last group of cabins he met Langley himself, who by this time was well enough to resume his place in the small world, and hearing his story, Langley's anxiety was greater than his own. "I saw him last night on my way home," he said, "about this time too, for I remember he was sitting in the moonlight at the door of his shanty. We exchanged a few words, as we always do, and he said he was there because he was not needed, and thought a quiet night would do him good. Is it possible no one has seen him since?" In sudden alarm. "Come with me," said his companion. Overwhelmed by a mutual dread, neither spoke until they reached the shanty itself. There was no sign of human life about it. The door stood open, and the only sound to be heard was the rustle of the wind whispering among the pines upon the mountain side. Both men flung themselves from their horses with loudly beating hearts. "God grant he is not here," uttered Langley. "God grant he is anywhere else, the place is so drearily desolate." Desolate indeed. The moonbeams streaming through the door threw their fair light upon the rough boards and upon the walls, and upon the quiet figure lying on the pallet in one of the corners, touching with pitying whiteness the homely face upon the pillow and the hand that rested motionless upon the floor. The doctor went down on his knees at the pallet's side, and thrust his hand into the breast of the coarse garments with a half-checked groan. "Asleep," he broke from Langley's white lips in a desperate whisper. Not. "Dead," said the doctor, "dead for hours." There was actual anguish in his voice as he uttered the words, but another element predominated in the exclamation which burst from him scarcely a second later. "Good God!" he cried, "good God!" Langley bent down and caught him almost fiercely by the arm. The exclamation jarred upon him. "What is it?" he demanded. "What do you mean?" "It is a woman." Even as they gazed at each other in speechless questioning, the silence was broken in upon. Swift, heavy footsteps neared the door, crossed the threshold, and Janner's daughter stood before them. There was no need for questioning. One glance told her all. She made her way to the moonlit corner, pushed both aside with rough strength, and knelt down. "I might ha' knowed," she said with helpless bitterness. "I might ha' knowed," and she laid her face against the dead hand in a sudden passion of weeping. "I might ha' knowed, Jinny lass," she cried, "but I didna. It was loike rest as tha should lay thee down and die loike this. Tha wast alone or along, and tha wast alone at last, but dunnot blame me, poor lass, nay, I know tha wiltna." The two men stood apart, stirred by an emotion too deep for any spoken attempt at sympathy. She scarcely seemed to see them. She seemed to recognize no presence but that of the unresponsive figure upon its lowly couch. She spoke to it as if it had been a living thing, her voice broken and tender, stroking the hair now and then with a touch all womanly and loving. "Yo were nigher to me than most folk, Jinny," she said. "And tha trusted me, I know." They left her to her grief until at last she grew calmer and her sobs died away into silence. Then she rose and, approaching Langley, who stood at the door, spoke to him, scarcely raising her tear-stained eyes. "I ha' summat to tell yo and summat to ax yo," she said, "an' I mun tell it to yo alone. Will yo come out here?" He followed her, wondering and sad. His heart was heavy with the pain and mystery the narrow walls enclosed. When they paused a few yards from the house, the one face was scarcely more full of sorrow than the other, only that the woman's was wet with tears. She was not given to many words, Bess Janner, and she wasted few in the story she had to tell. "Yo no secret as she carried," she said, "or I wouldna tell yo even now, and now I tell it yo that she may carry the secret to her grave and ha no gossiping tongue to threep at her. I dunnot want folk starrin' and wonderin' and mackin' talk. She's born Eno." "It shall be as you wish, whether you tell me the story or not," said Langley. "We will keep it as sacred as you have done." She hesitated a moment, seemingly pondering with herself before she answered him. "Aye," she said, "but I ha' another reason behind. I want summat fro yo, I want yo a pity. Happen it moight do her good even now." She did not look at him as she proceeded, but stood with her face a little turned away and her eyes resting upon the shadow on the mountain. "There were a lass as worked at Deepton Mines," she said. "A lass as had a weakly brother as worked and lodged wy her. Her name were Jinny, and she were quiet and plain-favoured. There were other wenches as were well-looking, but she wasna. There were others as had homes, and she hadna one. There were plenty as had wit and sharpness, but she hadna them neither. She were nowt but a desolate homely lass as seemed to ha no place I world, and yet were tender and weak-hearted to core. She were a lose long in fur summat as she were na loik to get. And she niver did get it, fur her brother wasna one as cared fur oat but his own doings. But there were one among all rest as niver passed her by, and he were Mester's son. He were a bright handsome chap, as won his way everywhere and had a coined word or a laugh fur or. So he gave lass a smile, and did her a favour now and then, look as not without jivin it more than a thout, until she learned to live on hope o' seeing him. And bane weak and tender it grew on her fro day to day, until it seemed to give strength to her and tack it both I one. She stopped and looked at Langley here. "Does tha see oat now as I'm gettin' this fur?" she asked. "Yes," he answered, his agitation almost mastering him, "and now I have found the lost face that haunted me so." "Aye," said Bess, "it was hers," and she hurried on huskily. "When you went away she couldna abide lonesomeness, and so one day she said to her brother, Dave, let us go to new mine where Mester Eddard is. And him bane a lose ready for a move, they started out together. But on way lad took sick and died sudden, and Jinny were left to hersen. And then she seed new trouble. She were beset wide danger as she'd nigh without on, and before long she found out as women didna work this side the sea as they did ours. So at last she were driv upon a strange loik plan. It sounds wild happen, but it wasna so wild after all. Her bits of clothes jiv out and she had no money, and there were Dave's things. She'd wore loik at her work I Deepton, and she made up her mind to wear 'em agin. Yo didna know her when she coom here, and no one else guessed at truth. She didna expect nowt, yo see. She only wanted comfort o' hearin' voice she'd longed and hungered for, and here were where she could hear it. When I fun her out by accident she told me, and sin, then we've kept secret together. Do yo guess what else there's been betwixt us, Mester?" "I think I do," he answered. "God forgive me for my share in her pain." "Nay," she returned, "it was no fault o' thine. She never had a thought o' that. She had a patient way why her had Jinny, and she bore her trouble better than them as hopes. She didna ax nor hope neither, and when Thearcum fresh hurt to her she were ready and waiting knowing as it moight come ony day. Happen Lord knows what life were give her fur, I dunnot but it's o'er now, and happen she knows hersen. I hurried here to neat, she added battling with a sob. As soon as I heard as she was missin', truth struck to my heart, and I thought as I should be here first, but I wasner I ha not gotten no more to say. They went back to the shanty, and with her own hands she did for the poor clay the last service it would need, Langley and his companion waiting the while outside. When her task was at an end she came to them, and this time it was Langley who addressed himself to her. "May I go in?" he asked. She bent her head in assent, and without speaking he left them and entered the shanty alone. The moonlight, streaming in as before, fell upon the closed eyes, and hands folded in the old fashion upon the fustian jacket. The low whisper of the pines crept downward like a sigh. Kneeling beside the pallet, the young man bent his head and touched the pale forehead with reverent lips. "God bless you for your love and faith," he said, "and give you rest." And when he rose a few minutes later, and saw that the little dead flower he had worn had dropped from its place and lay upon the pulseless breast, he did not move it, but turned away and left it resting there.